passionate about landscape photography. I'm Grant Swinburne and I'll be your host on this show, talking to landscape photographers about their motivations, what photography means to them, and to dig a little deeper into the way they think about their photography. Helen Sear is a Royal Academician and internationally recognised artist whose work explores the fragile coexistence between human, animal and natural environments. Rooted in Magic Realism, Surrealism and Conceptual Art, Helen's practice challenges traditional ideas of photography, perception and visual storytelling. Originally trained in fine art at Reading University and the Slade School of Art, UCL, Helen first gained prominence in the late 1980s through mixed media installation, performance and video. Her photographic work reached international attention in the landmark British Council exhibition Decomposition, Constructed Photography in Britain, which toured Latin America and Eastern Europe in 1991. Photography remains central to her practice, yet Helen uses it in unconventional ways, questioning fixed-point perspective and the dominance of the camera lens. Her work often incorporates painting, sculptural elements and layered imagery to activate emotional and sensory responses beyond pure visual representation. In what I felt was a captivating discussion, Helen reveals how her unique journey through fine art and alternative media led her to create immersive photographic works. Helen shares insights on navigating the art world, the significance of exhibiting work, and the lifelong creative exploration driving her art. We gain a rare insight into a career driven by experimentation, emotional depth, and a lifelong commitment to expanding what photography can be. I hope you enjoy the show. G'day, Helen. Welcome to Landscape Photography World. How are you going?
I'm very good, thank you. A little bit cold. I'm here in the winter in France, but very good. I'm in my studio.
Excellent. Thank you for agreeing to be on the show. You're someone that I've wanted to talk to for quite a while, and I've got a very long list of people that I'm talking to, and it's just working my way through and eventually inviting everybody that I want to talk to. As I said before we started, I like to understand why people are photographers first and foremost, but then also why they choose to photograph in the way that they do. And I know your art expands beyond mere photography. I know you do lots of different styles of art, and I'd like to talk a little bit about that as we go forward in the conversation. So why don't we start with, why do you do photography at all?
Oh, just the big question. Well, first of all, thank you very much for asking me. It's always good to actually be to talk about the work and have people question what you do. But in answer to the first question, it sort of happened because in the 1970s, I didn't train as a photographer.
Right.
Unlike a lot of my friends who are photographers and make photography, they're good at what they do. I call them proper photographers. But I kind of came to photography through a slightly different route. And I studied fine art as a BA, so I did painting and sculpture and printmaking. But it was a time when there was a new kind of thing happening, which was kind of called alternative media or time-based media, or everything that wasn't really, So it was kind of print-based. So I was very attracted to this studio because I thought, well, I'm not really a painter. I don't want to be tied down to what sculpture is or what painting is. But this kind of alternative media area attracted me. And so I moved into this studio at the last 2 years of my BA. And we were actually printing and developing our own 16mm film. There were dark rooms there. There were tape slide projectors there. And so we were kind of doing, I think, really exciting things, but with very out-of-date equipment in a way. Oh, and so that's how it started, really.
Okay.
And also in that kind of sort of studio framework, photography in the UK, where I studied, still wasn't really, not in fine art. It wasn't really a thing of its own. It was separated. There were photography schools. There was Farnham and PCL and there was a history of photography. I didn't learn about it. the history of art, of which photography was part of it. So I think, yeah, that's really...
I think historically, photography, I don't want to say it's always been looked down upon by the fine arts sort of practices, but it seemed to be defined as a lesser thing in terms of fine art in days gone by. It's less so now, and it's much more an accepted part of the artistic practice across lots of different genres, and, video and, various other media have come into that. But I think, very early on in the 50s and 60s in particular, it would be very rare to actually see a fine art gallery put on a photography exhibition. It would happen, but it would be something that happened often.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I think perhaps they're a bit ahead of the game in the States with that.
Yeah.
But definitely it was very, very separated in the UK. And I think the first time I realised that photography could be shown in an art gallery was I saw some pictures of Thomas Joshua Cooper's landscape photo. And he was working in Glasgow at the time, head of photography at Glasgow School of Art. And he is showing some pictures in a big Hayward show, which had lots of other, I can't remember the name of the show. It was so long ago. There were lots of other media in that show. And then I thought, oh my goodness, photography can exist with all other media. Yeah, interesting. But it took quite a while, I think, in the UK, because and even to be shown in galleries, I think, because it was always competing with status of painting.
Yeah.
And because you could kind of reproduce it, it was somehow lesser.
Yeah. It's been a similar sort of experience here in Australia. The sort of National Art Gallery or the state-run galleries tend to focus on sculpture, painting, the traditional artistic media, and photography took quite a while. I would say probably in the 70s, 80s, that started to change, and you started to get this photographic practice starting to appear in some of those galleries. It's not to say that it never happened, but it was certainly something, as I say, that was quite separate.
Well, I think it's quite interesting, because, photography, often people divide things in terms of media, like is it sculpture, painting, is it photography, which I find are not very useful.
No.
I think what interested me, because you're saying about the 70s and the 80s, sort of coming towards the end, at the beginning of the 80s, of the kind of conceptual art movement. And I think I was quite influenced by that as well.
Yeah.
And I think it was what always interested me, as well as it being, being the medium, it is actually what is photography, the idea of photography. So photography is a subject as well. There had to be a reason for me to use photography. Well, it is not.
I'll come back to that, which will give you a bit of time to think of an answer. I guess one of the things that you talked about in terms of using some of the outdated equipment and so forth, one of the things that I've read about you is that you developed a few interesting development techniques with negatives, and the way that you actually created the image. You do quite, and that's kind of continued as an arc through your work. You're actually doing blended images, whether they're negatives or digital, and you're also applying inks and paints and various other media to the artwork itself, so that it goes well beyond mere photography, as we've just been talking about, where you take a photo and then you develop that and end up with a finalized image. Can you talk to me a little bit about the thinking that's gone into how you've challenged the norms in terms of photography and changed the way that photography as a medium can be seen in relation to fine art?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. I think initially, when I started making prints, because the first thing I'd like to say is that there's two things. There's the thing that we all now see on the screen or we work with, and then there's the material print. And I always wanted it to have a kind of material presence. So it's very important to me. So it's not, it's somehow I'm kind of trying to, okay, it's not the kind of window into the world that, you know, that photography, you know, has been associated with. I think, and then I started to print, I got very frustrated with the kind of, I don't know, the sort of, you know, what is this? The thinness of this bit of paper. What do I do with it? Because I was working in an art school, you know.
Yeah.
So I think I was trying to find ways of just kind of drawing attention to the materiality of the image in some sort of way.
Yeah. Okay.
So kind of in a way, sort of denying the viewer a clear kind of consumption of the image in a way. I was putting things in.
Or it's not, here's the image, off you go, and you can glance at it and disappear. You've actually got to engage with it and think about it a little bit.
And also I was working with whatever was around. I didn't have any fancy equipment when I first started. I thought I had a 1947 Rolleiflex.
Wow. Yeah.
And then, you know, I had an old slide projector. So I would kind of pick up or work with whatever was at hand. So I haven't, you know, I've got a nice camera now, but equally, I always like to kind of, you know, in hindsight, I was trying to just get the most out of what I had. So, you know, I'd use the stuff I had to create things. So, for instance, early on, I got a whole collection of, you know, 35mm Kodachrome slides, and I'd be using those to light something because I didn't have any lighting. So I put the slide in the slide projector, and then I'd be projecting stuff in my domestic space or the interior, and then rephotograph with an old camera. And so it was about being, I suppose, trying to be inventive with your limitations. And I think that kind of probably came from education, really, because colleges always, as I said before, they always kind of, you know, got hold of equipment when it was virtually obsolete. We were working with, it was great, really. It kind of teaches you a good lesson to be inventive, I think.
I guess that experimentation has very much been at the forefront of your thinking, as far as I can see from your work, and trying to challenge the viewer in the presentation of your work. I guess those two elements, what are the key drivers for you that drive that experimentation and drive that challenge to the viewer?
Yeah, that's interesting. The process is very important, but the process has to have a kind of, it runs in parallel with the thinking. So one kind of informs the other. I'm not trying, I remember what somebody said to me once, I see a lot of work now, which is almost like, these aren't my words, it's somebody else's words, it's like added art, or photography with a bit of added art on it. And I think when I started, I'm always very critical about why I'm using this process, and it has to have some kind of relevance. The process has to have I don't use the same process all the time. When you were talking about painting, the series I started in lockdown here, you know, COVID is when we couldn't go into the forest. I've been photographing in this particular forest, which is very close to my home, and I've been photographing all of the marks on the trees that the wood not woodcutters, they're foresters. They mark the trees and they've got this, it's kind of like a kind of woodland graffiti. It's like a rural graffiti, and they're kind of, this one's going to be cut, this one's going to stay, this is a parcel of land that is being worked by so and so. And I was fascinated by these marks, and I've been photographing them for about 10 years. And so I decided to, it was almost kind of, I was photographing these paint marks, and in a way I was photographing the paint marks and then lifting the paint marks in the computer from the picture, and kind of, so they kind of escaped the boundaries of the trees. And so it was like I was painting photographs and photographing paint, because I decided that I wanted to, then after that, I wanted to paint almost like my signature in this. It was kind of, so there was a sort of reason, there was a way that I'm thinking, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, it definitely does.
And the ones with much earlier, these are quite recent. I'm sort of thinking about them because I'm trying to put them together in some sort of book form at the moment.
Okay.
But that's quite difficult to do because they've got lots of different variations. They're all in kind of various. But anyway, that's another story. But like the earlier bits of the work that I did, which is inside the view, which was the kind of the back of a head in the landscape. And I spent a long time. I think what I wanted to do was, I mean, if we're talking about landscape, I was always quite interested in how I could actually describe the feeling of being surrounded by a landscape rather than just me being there with the camera and the view being over there.
Yeah, it's the view that I'm seeing.
Yeah. And so I was trying to think, how can I do something with that? And so I had a whole series of pictures that I took of primarily women in the landscape looking out. And then I took another picture of a different landscape. And then in the computer, I put the two pictures together. And I, with a tablet and a pen, I erased with this kind of very small, like handwork, like lace or something, foxtail, but lace. So I was erasing the front image so that the back image came through. You never saw both pictures. You could never see one picture in its entirety. And I suppose I was trying to do something immersive, but on a flat.
Yeah. I think that's always a challenge, and it certainly one of the things that I guess a more traditional landscape image tries to do. At least I know that's what I'm from it. You're trying to increase depth in a two-dimensional image so that the viewer actually feels their way through the image, either from front to back or back to front or side to side. Regardless, you choose where you want the viewer to focus their attention first, and hopefully, if you've done your job, you're getting their eye to roam around the image in a pattern that you'd like. So I guess that effort to try and make something which is three-dimensional into two dimensions, to trade as three dimensions,
yes,
is quite a challenge. And I certainly, having seen some of that work that you just talked about, definitely get that feeling. It's very different to some of the sort of stuff that I might do, where I'm picking out a foreground element and a background element and and so forth. But I still get that same sort of feeling of three-dimensionality and depth in the image.
Yes.
And I guess that side of things is, for most landscape photographers, the end goal is that you're trying to immerse the viewer in the image.
Absolutely. And I agree with that. I think maybe it's my way out of not being very technical. I don't know. I think it is to do with, I totally get what you're saying, and I have so much admiration for people, for what I call the kind of pure photographers. I have a friend who I'm going to suggest to you.
Awesome.
As somebody else you might like to talk to, called Terry Weifenbach, who's an American photographer, who does exactly what you were just describing. The way she uses the camera, I just have an amazing kind of admiration for. But I think I'm probably more a sort of hands-on person. I like the labor of the hand.
Yeah.
I like to be. And the reason I make photographs rather than just paintings or whatever, I think it's very important for me to have actually physically been at the place. It's really important. It's not something that's kind of been, imagined or invented by myself. It's it's very important that I've stood there, I've been there and seen the light of all this, but then I can never I try sometimes I can. I do take some, what I might call photographs, which, I mean, I don't want to sort of separate too much. I don't think.
Yeah.
But I think quite often when I come back with, the stuff, if I've been out and taken some photographs, I come back and I sort of want to try and reconstruct that experience. Well, how do you represent that experience? And I think the three-dimensionality, I agree. I mean, I think it's also, for me, it's about, quite often, I see landscape photography, there's a kind of distance.
Sure.
There is a distance. You can see that the photographer's been standing in one place. The distance of all the things that you were talking about, with focus and depth of field and all that kind of thing, and light. But I don't know I mean, I don't know. Who knows what we're trying to do? But in one way, I think I'm kind of, in some cases, trying to collapse that distance and bring the image right to the sort of the surface of the eye in a way. I don't know. The landscape is always the landscapes I've been. I think trying to kind of ask, what is a landscape? I think is quite interesting as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's one I personally have a very broad, inclusive kind of definition of. So, urban landscapes, intimate landscapes where you might be focusing on a fungus or a tree stump or and the grand vistas and everything in between. For me, all of those are landscape.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think it's quite interesting trying to break down those things between what's a portrait, what's a landscape, what's a still life. Again, it's those three kind of things.
Humans like to define,
which can be blurred together. Yeah, I'm trying to think about because when I did some work back in 25 years ago, which was they were called animal landscapes.
Yeah, right.
I don't know whether you've seen, but I was photographing the backs and the bellies of animals in natural history. They were taxidermies.
Okay. Yeah.
And I was photographing skies.
Yeah.
Just I had a massive collection of photographs of skies, and then whenever I went somewhere, I'd be photographing animals or the backs of them.
Sure.
And then when I first started using a computer, I didn't want it to look, because it was very fashionable when oh my God, you can't do digital, all the, something's left the room and all this kind of stuff. But I started working digitally. And so the first thing I did, I wanted it to look like it was a straight shot, even if it was constructed. So I was trying to match the skies to the backs of the animals. So when you saw it at first glance, you might think it was a plausible landscape. But then when you got close, you realised
what it was,
that something was wrong, and that in fact the ground was the animal.
Interesting.
So I quite I enjoyed playing with those kind of things.
Yeah. I think you mentioned there the desire for a lot of people to sort of, I don't know if the desire is the right word. I guess the offence some people take at composite photography. And I love pointing out to them that composite photography has been around since pretty much the dawn of photography. And if you then take things further back into art history and have a look even as far back as Roman and Greek frescoes, they're definitely composite images because they're showing a story. The whole point is that you have populations that can't read, so you're actually telling a story through those frescoes to explain, here's why this person is important, or here's why this story is important to that population. And I think, composite imagery can be a very powerful medium to express ideas and change people's views of things. I think digitally, it sometimes gets a little bit overused, and where I dislike its use is where people, and it's AI as well, where people are saying this is, I was standing here and this is what it looked like when, and it might be the Southern Aurora, being shown over the Sydney Opera House whilst looking north. That's never going to happen.
No, I know. I mean, AI is...
No, we'll get into that.
I mean, you're right, because the whole idea of, the pictorial in landscape, because landscape came from painting, didn't it? I mean, in a way, a lot of photography was, well, it still is, but I think it's really, really, you can't not be influenced by painting. and the kind of rules of painting and all the rest of it. And it's there, even in the most hardcore documentary photography. And I'm photographers, and I know quite a few of them because I worked in the documentary photography department in Newport in South Wales. And I mean, I could see even in their kind of, I was the kind of polar opposite to them, but I had a very good friend, Ken Grant, who we used to talk a lot about this. I could see all the kind of the compositions and all this stuff was taken.
The compositional elements, I think that, I don't want to call them rules, though, you have the rule of thirds and all those sorts of things, golden ratio, et cetera, et cetera. But the reason they exist is they're merely an analysis of what attracts the human eye to an image. And those compositional rules, for want of a better term, are there to help you, as a beginner, learn how to compose. At least that's how I view it. I'd be interested in your view on that.
Well, it's interesting because a guy called Jay Appleton, and I forgot the name of his book. Excuse me.
Not a problem.
He talked really interestingly about the idea of beauty in an image and how that is, what that means. And with you saying, well, yes, on one level, there is all these kind of rules and, things that have come out of painting and Renaissance painting. But he felt that beauty was something much more primal. And that it was like he wrote something called prospect, refuge and hazard theory. Yeah. And it was like, if you looked out, it was about something was beautiful if you looked out from a place and you could survive in it. So there might be water, there might be trees, there might be, I don't know, and you had somewhere to hide. And I just thought that really blew me away, actually, that it's something still very primal enough.
Absolutely.
In terms of what beauty is. It's not just geometry and measurements and...
I think people are very surprised about how much the primitive part of their brains controls what they do and see.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there's an exactly... I don't usually do skies. I'm always kind of like, I'm definitely looking at the earth and the undergrowth and the things on the ground and the extraordinary that I find or I want to make out of the ordinaries. My landscapes are from places I can walk to from where I live. They're not exotic in a sense. Because I'm really interested in making something which I find familiar, extraordinary. That's, the day to day in a way. Those are the sort of magical moments that happen when you know somewhere quite well, but then every day it's different, isn't it? The lights change.
Absolutely. Yeah. I really admire people that can take something mundane and turn it into something that is almost exotic.
Yeah, it's just something, it makes you look again in a way. It's something that you might not have looked at
Absolutely.
before. Mind you, I have been thinking, there are places I would like to go to. I'd like to get in there. Probably New Zealand. Probably come back that way at some point. But there's always fantastic landscapes around everywhere.
Yeah, I don't think it matters where you are. You can almost always find something interesting to take images of. I struggle in suburban landscapes, and the reason this podcast exists is evidence of that. We had our lockdown for 165 days, a limit of 5 kilometres that we could travel from our front door, and the nearest piece of water to me is a muddy brown stream that runs through a park. To me, it's not very photogenic. I'm sure somebody else and somebody perhaps like yourself could look at that and go, "Oh, yes, this excites me. This is something that doesn't make my hands." Whereas, if I go to a beach and there's water rushing across rocks, then my heart's skipping a beat, and I'm going, okay, I can work this, and I know I know where I am, I know what I'm trying to do. But I think that familiarity is is an important thing to remember. You know, going into landscapes that you've never been to can be very challenging. I sometimes find it's very difficult. Okay, so where do I find the composition? What are the elements that I'm looking for? How do I put that together? Whereas if I'm in a place that I've been several times before, or even a couple of times before, it might only be an exploratory trip the morning before, I know kind of where I want to be and where I want to stand and what elements I'm trying to line up and so forth. And I think it's important for photographers to think about that when they are going to places that they've not been before, or where they have limited time or whatever. You need to do some research and find out what's there before you get there, so that you can actually work out, okay, what am I working with?
Yeah, no, I agree. And also that I know now when I go into the wood forest, because I've been going for several years now, but I know this, I know the places where at certain times of day the light is going to be. It's always like that. There's places I want to photograph, and the light's never going to be.
Yeah.
It's really, it's so funny. But it sounds so kind of. It sounds weird for me to be saying that, but I suddenly realised, why is it always great here? Why?
And it's
You can't.
Yeah, those little local conditions and angles of the sun at certain times of the year or whatever, and you know that. Yeah.
And I've been on it on a very kind of micro level. And, it takes taken a long time for the penny to drop. I think the proof is that sometimes I've come back when I've always photographed in one place or something. And you realise why, because there's just something quite magical about the place at a certain time. Yeah. Yeah.
I'd like to talk a little bit about exhibiting your work and how that started for you. What was your first exhibition, and how did that come about? What were the circumstances that led you to say, okay, well, I'm going to get this work out there and into the public eye? Because I think it's something that a lot of people can be quite nervous and worry and get quite stressed about before they do actually take that leap. And they're saying, well, these are my babies or whatever it is. And with a feeling for you, how did you feel when you first exhibited?
I think I probably, the first things I exhibited were probably only a tiny bit of it was photographic in a way. So, and there were lots of sort of installations and mixture of film and, various things. I'm just trying to think about the first time it was one of those sort of happy accidents in a way, because I'd been working away and I was living in Wales and I was working in my own domestic space with whatever I had. And when I first college in the 80s, I moved to London and I was working in an architecture bookshop, and I met the girlfriend of a guy who worked in the shop as well, and we used to go and have, drinks after work and all this. Anyway, we sort of lost contact, and 10 years afterwards, she was like running the print. She was in the print, running the print part of the Photographers Gallery in London.
Right.
And then she got her own gallery. And meanwhile, I'd been making work, and I got to, this was quite late on, really. This was, can't remember, must have been, you're asking me to go back too far now. When I was 30, but I've been doing lots of work, probably. Started to make my experience of working in a three-dimensional space, or doing kind of what used to be called installation work. It was just a term at the time. But I started trying to make that three-dimensional experience into a single image. Yeah. How could I do that? And I was using the projectors I talked about earlier in my domestic space, re-photographing them, all on analog film. Mm-hmm. But I think I got just about enough images that were like a body of work. And I don't know, there was just this, I decided to phone up Zelda Cheekle, and I just phoned her up, and it just happened to be her birthday. And I think she'd had a few drinks, and she said, I said, I wanted to come and show you some photographs. And she said, oh, thanks. But I didn't wait. It's kind of, I had to feel sure that, not that they were particularly finished or well or anything, but I thought I had enough to show. And the next minute it was just a lot of luck, really. There was a big show that the British Council had been curating, and I was the unknown person in it. And it was called Decomposition, Constructive Photography in Britain. And so there were some big names in it. And they were predominantly people who weren't photographers, but were using photography. And it was that kind of time at the end of the 80s when advertising photography was really big in the UK, and a lot of these artists were using that same kind of advertising language, and there was anyway, and also about ecology and landscapes. It was interesting. And I'd been borrowing all these stuffed animals from the museum in Cardiff, photographing them in my living room, and anyway, that kind of weird things. And I got put into this show, which toured the whole of Latin America, and it was curated by Brett Rogers and Andrea Rose, who was the head of the British Council, and it went all the way around Latin America. It toured for 8 years in Eastern Europe and Latin America, because the whole remit of the British Council was
to take Britain to the world.
Yeah. So that was a brilliant, but I'd been working for almost 10 years. At least 5 or 6 years before I showed anybody my photographs. I think the pressure is now is that you suddenly got to kind of leave. I'm talking about people who go to college. There's a lot of photographers who don't go to college, but I'm just using a lot of people coming out of photography college, perhaps, or who think that immediately they've got to be in there and doing it. There is something. There's something to be said for holding on to what you've got until you feel that, so that you're kind of taking control of your success. And sometimes it takes a long time to find your voice. And I think for me, it's a continuous thing. And I know that I have lots of very good photography friends. And I call them photography friends because they've gone through a very different kind of, they view their work very differently, I think. They see it, they want it published, they want it in a book. They don't want to make the work unless it's funded. If you know what I mean? There's a whole different kind of set of rules, which so I'm sort of in the middle. I'm on the fence, really, between, just doing it because I need to do it. I'm going off the question, really. You asked me.
Well, I guess that feeling of being ready and saying, okay, here's a body of work that I pulled together. How did you get the confidence built up within yourself to say, okay, well, it's now time to get this out into the world and get people to take a look at it?
And it's also kind of those, absolutely, and think carefully about who you show it to first, really.
Yeah.
It does help if you've made, everybody makes networks, and however slight those might be, but to really do the research about whether you think somebody's going to, respond to this work or not. I mean, it's looking for a publisher or looking for, or I don't know, it's like probably 99% of them aren't really, they're not going to get what you're doing, or maybe they, I think it's about finding, I don't know, maybe it's more difficult today, but I don't know.
Yeah.
There are more opportunities in some ways, I think, to get your work, definitely more opportunities to get your work seen.
Oh, definitely. And I think there's probably more opportunities for self-publishing and those sorts of things. You've seen quite a lot of people doing zines and doing their own books, publishing and funding. I know quite a few photographers who crowdfund their publishing.
Or, or you can put a print in, you do something, put a print in it, and you can pre-sell stuff. But you can cover your costs at least. Oh, I don't know. I think you've really good, but I'm probably not the right person to talk to because I'm just sort of quite. I always worked in education, sort of part time, in order to fund what I did in a way.
Yeah.
I stopped doing that 10 years ago, but I was always aware I didn't really want to have to follow the market. I was still trying to experiment, though I knew that I had to do something else to kind of support myself. I wasn't necessarily going to sell anything.
Yeah, sure.
But I think it's a different, people have different trajectories in a way. But I think the greatest thing now is there's all these kind of online courses as well.
Oh,
You can go on and you can find a network of people. You know, if you get a good one, you don't have to go to college. There's a lot of people, I think, who are doing these things who had completely different careers, or there's young people who, I don't know, go on a workshop, or I think it's the network that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you show your work to your peers, or you end up going on, you know, I don't think that's ever wasted.
No, I think there's a real value in getting critique on your work. And
Absolutely.
it is important, though, as you said, that you trust the person that you're getting that critique from, or the people, the groups that you're getting that critique from, and you trust them to be constructive and not destructive. But I think getting critique on your work is an important way of understanding what you're doing better, putting together a body of work for somebody to take a look at and saying, okay, well, here's this theme, or here's this thread that runs through this body of work, and this is why I'm doing this body of work and why I'm doing this in a certain way, and how the images interplay with one another. It's important then to get somebody to say, okay, well, I think this one stands out as being not quite in that thread, or getting you to explain that helps you understand your work better.
Yeah, because I think it's a lifetime process about
Absolutely.
completely understands the work they're doing. Hindsight's a wonderful thing. You know, I give a fantastic lecture about my work, but at the time I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I don't think. Well, I did, but you know, I mean, hindsight. You look back and you think, oh, that's why I did that, and you sort of see something you did 30 years ago, and you're still doing the same thing now, and you think, oh, yeah, but. I think the work has to teach you something. And I think also sometimes the emphasis on explaining what you're doing, what the context is, you know,
very true.
And I think it's a good idea to fold your ground on that one in a way. I think it's a long process, and probably all of us are only dealing with one or two ideas, and I just feel I'm trying, I don't know. I think I know a bit more about what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
But I'm sort of going around something and trying different ways, because a lot of the work, but I still see it as a whole body of work, even though some of the things look very different. They're still dealing with similar things.
I think when people are passionate about something, those threads of that passion flow through everything they do.
Yeah. And sometimes there's a narrative, and sometimes there isn't a narrative.
Some pretty pictures are just pretty pictures.
But sometimes there doesn't have to be a narrative. You know, something else that can't be explained, and that's why they're making pictures. You know, it's not something that can be just kind of written down.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's this kind of thing where I'd been teaching, and you'd have seminars and there'd be students in there. Say, they show the work and say, this work is about this, 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 and this.
Yeah.
I look at the work and I just thought, no, it is. You know what I mean? It was, they felt they had to justify what they were doing.
Yeah, yeah.
And actually, in quite a few cases, the work was probably about something completely different, but they just needed a bit more time to kind of
what much more about. Yeah.
Well, I think there's so much pressure now to kind of, you know, come out of BA and you're fully formed photographer and with your business card and everything.
Yeah.
And yeah, there has to be some of that. You've got to be able to take opportunities, be able to sort of see when it's, you know, there's something there to be.
Yeah, definitely.
But I do think that I love going to something like Curry Photo, or you know, some of these big photo fairs where there's a massive sort of, and all the publishers are there, and you can look at all the books and all, and it's great. That's very exciting. And then you start to sort of, so you have to be aware of what's going on as much as you can. And what is good about the internet, you can.
Yeah.
And there's so many online courses now which are, you know, have people from all over the world on them, and your network in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm keen to explore the process of setting creative challenges. mentioned teaching, and I'm interested in whether or not you felt successful that you were able to teach people how to create or how to set themselves creative challenges, as opposed to having, because usually if you're in a course, the person running that course, regardless of where it is, they'll say, here's your challenge, right? And it might be street photography. Go and take the best street photography you can take this week, and you've got a week to do it, and come back and we'll all evaluate it. I'm talking about the reverse. You're setting your own challenges and saying, okay, well, here's where I want to take my work, or here's where I want to go. Do you have a process, or have you taught a process around setting those challenges for yourself?
The simple answer to that is no. The challenge for me comes from what emerges from the work that I've already done. So the work that I've done is usually pointing me in another direction because it's been fully successful, or there's something more that can be done. So I feel it's a it's an incremental thing. And those are the challenges. And maybe, I don't know whether there is a sort of a way of setting and just be. I mean, my challenge is to get up every morning and go into the studio, or go out and take the photographs, or spend far too much time looking at a computer screen. But to do that on a regular basis, and accept that a lot of the stuff I do is going to take an awful long time to resolve itself in a way. Because I have a series of photographs that's there for the one piece of work I made, which actually got printed out finally in 2024, was in a gallery, and it was a composite image. It was 4 meters by 1 meter, and it was made up of about 200 separate images of a tree that's fallen in the forest. And when I first started putting it together, I realized it was 7 years previously.
Wow.
And there was just something, I put it together and something wasn't right. It just took me that long. And I had to take something out of it. And the challenge was to kind of finish the work. But so I work on quite a few things at the same time. And then sometimes you open a drawer and think, oh yeah, well, that one's ready now. But I just knew there was something not quite right with this. And my husband actually pointed out that there was probably, I should get rid of one part of the image. And then it was a long kind of piecing together. Yeah. The challenge is, that's the challenge for me. When you start with something, and how from the start, which might be the taking of the photograph, right through to the resolution of how it's going to be hung, what scale it is, all those kind of things. But I think they're really difficult. I mean, sometimes to know what the right scale is for something. It's not just about the size. Something really small can really hold your attention for a long way away. Whereas some really large things are kind of overblown.
Too much to take in one go, and you've got to take another look at it to make it make sense. I think I understand what you mean, yeah.
But I think the challenge yes, sometimes it's really useful to have some, I don't know whether it's a challenge or to have some sort of boundary around the work, maybe, or you might decide that, okay, because sometimes there can be too many things going on, especially in mine. Okay. Sometimes it's very useful to say, well, actually, I'm going to take all my photographs in this place, and that is the only place. Set yourself some restrictions in a way that then allow you, it's a kind of challenge as well, that then allow you to be a bit more creative, I think.
I've done things like select a focal length and not veer from it, so take my 50mm lens out, and that's the only one I use, or an 85mm.
Yes.
Landscapes with an 85mm portrait lens is a challenge in itself, because with that prime lens, you have that restricted field of view, and that's all you can work with. And trying to work a landscape with that, for me, certainly challenging. And I think those sorts of things are some of the things that I do to, as you say, put a boundary around some kind of constraint around the work so that you have to work within those constraints, because those constraints, I think, help you resolve the end of the image at some point, whether it's a constraint in the field or a constraint in the studio.
Yeah. Well, I definitely constrain myself in the shooting because I think I've only got one lens.
Oh,
I've got a Hasselblad, which is really nice, but the lens it came with wasn't very good. I can't remember. It was just kind of slightly zoomed. It came with the kit.
Yeah.
And then I got a portrait lens, because I was actually making some portraits at the time, and I use that all the time for landscapes.
Fantastic.
I have to take a tripod though.
Yeah.
Because if I want to get any depth of field at all. But also I've done a lot of things with a tiny Canon. It was like a Canon power panel.
Yeah.
They don't make them anymore.
No.
And that's been absolutely brilliant at a certain distance. It's kind of knowing, you kind of know what you want, and then, some things don't work at a long distance, but these kind of smaller cameras can be absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I could use an iPhone, but I don't have a good enough one. But...
No, nor do I. My phone is, the camera on it's okay. I much prefer my my mirrorless though. You mentioned that piece of work which took you 7 years to resolve. I guess one of the things that everyone sharing their photography in whatever medium they're doing that, whether that's online or in a gallery or in print on books or whatever, I feel that they are trying to communicate something to their viewer. Otherwise, what's the point of what we do?
Yeah.
I'm interested not just in that piece of work, but in general in what you're doing. What is it that you're trying to communicate to your viewer? And I know that might vary, and it probably has varied over.
I think it's pretty. I think what I am trying to communicate to the viewer is that that. I mean, often you see the landscape as a player in the whole. If I'm the figure, that's the ground as we're there.
Yeah.
Like the figure and ground have equal status in a way for me.
Yeah.
When I was photographing the fallen tree, instead of taking one photograph, I was being like a scammer. So I was walking along this thing and then walking along the other side. And so I was kind of photographing up and down very imprecisely with my little camera. But so I was walking both sides of the tree because in a way it disrupts this thing that I think I've always been slightly worried about, which is the single point perspective, which we talked about a little bit earlier. The single point perspective where the human is there, the view's out there, and we are the dominant players in this. We construct the view.
Yeah.
What I like is to try and animate the viewer so they can't consume the whole image in one go. They have to walk up and down it, or they might have to be active in viewing. They can't just plonk themselves in one position.
Yeah.
Well, they can do what they want, but but in a way, I think I'm trying to do things to kind of make people not just be able to consume it all in one go. So if that makes any sense. Yeah. So by doing some of these composites, I probably could use a really flush panoramic camera, but I'm interested in me actually walking up and down, taking it, and then trying to reconstruct it in the computer. And you can see some of the mistakes, and the trees are out of line and stuff. And then you can tell quite often some of the photographs with this particular one I was talking about. It's called Anatomy of a Tree. And so there is a relationship to the body in a way. And I've shown it both horizontally and vertically, not flat. And I'd quite like it. I thought, this is great. I haven't done it upside down yet. That's probably not, I won't do that. But I think when you've got sort of like the camera becomes a bit like a not one eye. There's like lots and lots of eyes going on, and let's put back together. It does something slightly different.
Yeah.
And so it's not like that kind of thing. which I was also very interested in, is the way that nature and landscapes were constructed in dioramas, so the diorama with the taxidermy specimens, and then there'd be a painted landscape behind. But it was all made for the person to stand right in the middle and survey the whole thing.
Because if you go to one side, you can see the manufactured image, and you go, okay, well, if I'm looking at this wall, that looks wrong, and the perspective looking that way looks wrong. Yeah.
That's right. I think I'm always just trying to play around with that, really, or disrupt it a little bit, so that because there's so many pictures now, people just kind of like, like with phones and stuff, it's like so many, that people spend probably about, I don't know, a fraction of a second on an image, don't they? If you're lucky.
If you're lucky.
Yeah, and so in a way, it's about trying to slow down that kind of time of looking or being intrigued by something. It doesn't have to be all bells of the whistle.
The attention-grabbing images, which play well on social media, aren't necessarily the best images. You talked a little bit about your work helping you grow or teaching you things. What has your photography and your work taught you about the world or about yourself?
Oh, that's a hard one.
I like hard question.
It's a lot. That's really difficult. I don't know. I'm lost. What's it taught me about photography?
Well, how has it helped you grow or change as a person?
Well, I think in some kind of way, it's a tool for helping you. Well, it's a tool for trying to work out certain problems. And I think I think there's a lot of, I think a lot of things come from very early experiences as a child. I don't want to get into a psychological thing.
Yeah, sure.
But there's certain things that are obsessed. I can look back at my work now and I can say, my God, I must have been really interested. I was really interested because there was all these kind of this taxidermy specimen in the house, and I remember this when my parents bought this old Victorian house, and it was auctioned, and it was like full of taxidermy specimens, and they all got sold off except for this one thing, this woodcock.
Okay.
And it was like, and my father used to take my mum and dad used to take us out into the countryside for lots of walks, and he'd explain all the kind of plants and animals and things. It was a kind of love, and then he was a maxillofacial surgeon. So I saw some of he did a lot of photography of like before and after and all that kind of, which were kind of quite difficult to do.
I can imagine.
And so there's all these, but there was this kind of Kodachrome transparencies. I remember the kind of bright green, and then the red, and anyway, there's all I think there's an alphabet of things that you have in early life, and it's kind of I don't know if it's taught me anything, but it's kind of I don't know. I think it's a way of I think the conversation that you can have with the work, or if you allow the work to tell you something, then it's sort of a bit, that's what's interesting. And it's also, I've often been quite interested in places where, nature's been constructed, whether that's a supermarket, with the supermarket garden centre or a museum. And so there is something about being in the landscape, which is absolutely brilliant for my health and well-being. It's a place I love to be. Although I'm very sociable from time to time, I like my own company, and working in the studio is something that is, I couldn't do. I don't know what else I'll do now, but I feel very lucky. I feel very privileged that I can be, I'm retired from teaching, but I can get up in the morning. I can go and do some work. I've always got something I want to do. Yeah. I feel very privileged that I'm doing something I enjoy doing. I really not enjoy, but sometimes it's quite painful. I don't enjoy it all the time, but it's something I need to do, That's the challenge, really.
What are those sorts of times where it is painful? What sort of things, I guess, do you struggle with? Is it inspiration and actually saying, okay, well, I'm trying to do this, but it's not working, or what sort of things do you find back?
You might have an idea what you're doing, and sometimes you can't see the wood for the trees, literally. And that's when you need to have a few friends who you can trust. I went over to see a friend the other day and just laid out and do an edit, and she knows about book, that's what she does. And it was just, we didn't come to any conclusion, but it was just great to show them. And it doesn't matter how little the conversation is, it kind of, it'll spark something,
Mm-hmm.
And I think the struggle's always there, isn't it? Because most people I know who are any good have a lot of self-doubt.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
They're going to have self-doubt, but I think it's about not worrying if a lot of the stuff you do is not going to be very good, or it takes a long time. And then suddenly it's about recognizing, isn't it, when something's working. And sometimes I don't recognize when it's working. And sometimes I just look at it and I think, it's any good or isn't it? And then one day it can be, and then the next day it isn't.
Yeah. It means
you can put it in a drawer for 2 years as a sort of write-off. You take it out again. It's a good test, actually.
Mm.
And sometimes the work you thought was really good, you put it on thing.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I have looked from a couple of years ago.
I know, but sometimes you thought it was really bad, so don't throw it away.
Oh, yeah.
Then you put something up, and there it is. And it has it. I think that not just photography, but art in general, it kind of has its moment.
Mm.
And it came out this moment. And sometimes it can be dormant for a bit, and then it comes out, and either it resonates with something that's happening at the moment, or it just resonates. You're able to kind of see it.
Mm.
So I don't think it's static. Even photography is supposed to be about the moment. I think it changes as a print, as an object.
I think that's
it changes over time.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I've got some questions that I ask pretty much everyone, and I'd just like to run through them now, if you like. They don't have to be rapid fire. You can take as long as you want to answer them. What's the best and or worst piece of advice anyone's given you? And that doesn't have to be photography related.
Okay, the worst piece of advice, I can swear on this.
Yeah, sure.
Advice I was given was, if you're going to do, maybe it was the best piece of advice. If you're going to carry on doing that shit, you might as well go home and knit me a fucking jumper. But that was one, might have been a good piece of advice. I'm not going to said that to me, but I was a student at the time.
I was going to say, it sounds like something somebody would say to a student.
God, you wouldn't be able to say that anymore.
No, you're not allowed to say that now.
The best piece of advice. Oh, yeah, I think it was one of the best pieces of advice I got was about putting my energy, and I think it was when I was kind of quite young and wild, and going out a lot and everything. And I think somebody told me that it would be that you can either be really wild and interesting as a person, or you can put that energy into your work. But you've got to make that choice, And I think that was quite a good bit of advice.
Not bad. Like it.
Yeah.
What do you see as photography's place in society?
Well, that's interesting, because I've had these sort of arguments with had an argument with a photographer, Paul Rees, once, a documentary photographer, and he was saying that it had to have a social relevance and impact in society, which I completely disagreed with.
Yeah.
I felt that I had to be responsible as a citizen, but the work is a place where anything could happen. Mm. I think its role I don't know what its role is. Lots of different roles in society. Yeah, for me, I wouldn't want to say that, but I know people have very strong views about that.
What do you think its future is?
It's interesting in terms of the future, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
I don't know. Everybody said that when, they've said that when photography came along, painting was dead. Well, it's just not true, is it?
Photography is going to die. And that's been happened with digital. It's happened,
Well, yeah. And now AI is coming along.
Yeah.
I have no idea, really.
Okay.
I've just sort of, I don't know. I mean, maybe the younger person might have a better idea than me.
That's fine.
But it has a very, it has a very, the photography in the book is fantastic. It has a way of being able to tell stories, tell narratives, I think that's really important.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but in terms of my own work, I have no idea. I think, I know lots of other people are doing really interesting things, and it has a really...
What do you like to do when you're not doing photography or doing art?
Yeah. Walking, swimming, reading, watching films,
Nice.
binge watching Netflix. Spending time with friends.
Nice.
I mean, it's quite interesting that I recently was elected a Royal Academician in London 18 months ago. So that's really interesting, because there are very few people who have worked with photography.
That's great.
It's a really interesting situation to be in, and I'm sitting on committees, and I curated the summer show,
Right.
a big gallery in the summer exhibition last year, and I had to put 200 pieces of work in one room. And that was probably the most intense thing I've ever done. It was absolutely great. I loved it, and I realized how much I enjoyed hanging everybody else's work. I did a photography wall for the first time. That was fantastic. So that's my kind of, I love doing things like that. My kind of network. 'Cause a lot of the time, I'm sitting here now, I have a very quiet life, but I'm going backwards and forwards and doing things like that. So I was sort of 6 weeks hanging that show in London, and that was great.
Marvelous.
Yeah, I did. So that's what I did. It's that kind of combination between the kind of solitude and then doing something, getting back in there in the middle of it, really.
Yeah. Nice. I'm going to ask you, are there any photographers that you think I should be talking to? You mentioned one earlier.
Yeah, I just thought Terry Wyfenbach I think should be interesting. She's she's I can send you her coordinates afterwards.
All right, fantastic. That'd be great. Thank you.
There's another guy I think really interesting in Britain. I don't know where he's based, in Bristol, I think, called Robert Darch.
Yep.
He's really interesting.
Awesome.
I think both those people would be good. I mean, there's lots of people, aren't there?
No.
I haven't seen your full list.
I haven't spoken to either Terry or Robert, so that's fantastic to add some new names to the list.
Yeah, I'm very different, but very photographic.
Awesome.
I've just been, I think I've been accepted into the photography world in a way. In a nice way. I think so.
Well,
yeah, but you wanted people to talk about landscape particularly.
By and large, yeah.
The two people I think that, would be really good.
Fantastic.
So one from the US and one from the UK.
Thanks so much for talking to me today, Helen. It's been absolutely wonderful getting to know you better and learning more about what you do. Where can people find your work?
Well, I've got a website, which is, I've got sort of Instagram, and then there's a website, which is just helensear.com.
Awesome.
And I have I think that's I've got a pretty comprehensive website, actually. And there are some written bits as well. There's some kind of PDFs and stuff. And, when I used to do a lot more kind of writing about stuff, I'm kind of less and less. I'm doing that less and less now. But it's pretty comprehensive.
Awesome. Thank you.
I just asked for asking, and I'm sorry I didn't ask you. I hope I wasn't talking too much.
No, definitely not. My guests can't talk too much. I talk too much sometimes.
I didn't let you get a word in edgeways.
No, I feel like I had a fair go. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Helen.
Thanks very much.
Thanks again for listening to Landscape Photography World. I hope you enjoyed the show, and keep listening, because I'll be joined by some great guests in upcoming episodes. You can find my work in this podcast at grantswinburnphotography.com. along with prints, photography gear. I'm also on all of the social media you can find. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe because it really helps me get this podcast out there. I'm Grant Swinburne. Hope to see you out shooting soon.